let us all take a moment and acknowledge the obvious. College athletes are making money, finally, off their brand. Yes, it's due in large part because of name, image, and likeness. And college athletes are finally getting their fruits of their athletic labor. Now, as we transition from swallowing that reality, the question becomes, what's the key and core principles needed for athletes to maximize and optimize their brand and earning potential? We'll get to that question in just a moment, but I also wanted to bring your attention to the impact on the institutions who are now responsible for paying this money. According to Front Office Sports, in year 2 of NIL, 3/4 of NIL market revenue derived from college revenue. According to Opendorse, and for Power 5 Division 1 college programs to remain competitive in the NIL space, they'll have to offer prospective athletes an average of $1 million annually, according to this report. Now, back to my original proposition at the beginning of our conversation. How can athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness most effectively? For that, I'd like to introduce you to Jack Adler is the founder and CEO of To Win, which is an athlete marketing and personal brand content creation company, a creative agency which is reinventing the world of athlete marketing through strategic content partnerships. Adler knows all about name, image, and likeness and how it's transformed the world of college athletics and how athletes are using it to utilize the fullest potential of their brand. And he joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Jack, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend. And I have to tell you, as an old sports reporter, my friend, I circled this one on the calendar. So great to see you this morning. And thanks for a few minutes, my friend.
Yeah, no, 100%. I appreciate that, and let's get into it.
Absolutely, my friend. Now, I know that you're the CEO of a company called Out to Win, where you help athletes sort of build and leverage their brand using name, image, and likeness, my friend, and using strategic and creative partnerships. So tell me all about the great work that you do to help promote athletes, my friend.
Yeah, 100%. So we've been in the name, image, and likeness space since its inception back in 2021, working on both the side of the athlete, helping them navigate through building their personal brands, and on the side of the brand, the company, helping them facilitate campaigns, build out creative NIL partnerships, and really just helping both sides thrive and revolutionize the space as it evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jack, under that context, I'm wondering your definition of an effective and mutually beneficial strategic partnership and how you would describe that between an athlete and in a business or an athletic partner. So how do you describe effective strategic partnerships?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of used a terminology in there that I like to use, which is mutually beneficial. Uh, because you have a brand that's trying to see a return on investment. They're investing their marketing budget into an athlete and hoping to see results. And then you have an athlete who is, of course, looking to get some extra dollars in his bank account, his or her bank account, but also build their own personal brand in the process. So, in my opinion, the most mutually beneficial partnership is when a brand can see a return on their investment and an athlete can create content that is authentic to themselves, build their brand, keep trust with their audience in the process, and overall build a further relationship through that with that brand for future opportunities.
Yeah, no, Jack, I'm fascinated to ask you whether you think we can get out of sort of what I call the swamp mentality when it comes to NIL. While we both agree that athletes need to get paid for their work and their uh, from an athletic perspective, I'm wondering your perspective on whether you think NIL deals need to be regulated and whether you think there'll be eventual rules so it's not such a free for all when it comes to NIL, especially for Power Five conferences, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not involved in those discussions at the high level, but I of course follow them, and I hope that there can be regulation put in place soon because the reality of NIL right now is there are two sides to it. There are the brand partnerships, and there are the athletes just getting paid with lack of better wording, to come play at the school, to stay at the school, and that's exactly what NIL is not supposed to be about. But it seems like there's this little loophole that collectives have found to get athletes paid. And you know what? It's getting athletes paid, so I'm all for it. But in my opinion, the idea of NIL was supposed to be getting athletes paid for their market value, and in a lot of cases, that market value is getting outrageously increased for relationships with collectives. So my hope is that we can get back to really allowing athletes to get paid for their market value in the sense of the value they can provide to a brand within a marketing campaign.
Yeah, and Josh, just to follow up on that, I'm also wondering your perspective on how we can make sure athletes get compensated for their work, while also making sure that we don't lose the purity that makes college athletics so great.
I think the purity that makes college athletics so great is just young guys and girls competing. I think that when money comes into play, uh, of course, like people have the perspective that it takes purity out of it, and I can see that from that side of it. But I also don't think that it ruins the game, like so many people have said. I think it fairly gives athletes a return in value for what they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into. And as long as the compensation is within, like I said before, that fair market value, it keeps that overall competitive edge because you still are fighting to get to the next level. The issue is when you have players getting paid multi-million dollars, and realistically, do they even need to go out there and fight their way into a top NFL, NBA, professional draft position? Maybe not as much because the money that they've made at a young age can benefit them for years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jack, I'm also curious to ask you about content for athletes and really making sure that messaging is on point when it comes to creating content strategies and marketing strategies for athletes. So, well, what are your thoughts on making sure that a content marketing strategy for an athlete is dialed to really maximize its potential?
So when building a content marketing strategy for an athlete, we try to start with three brand pillars. So every athlete has aspects of their life off the field because you're a human being. We all have aspects of our life that ideally can be baked into three main pillars. For example, it might be fitness, it might be fashion, it might be video games, it might be family. And what we try to do is take those three pillars and build out content strategies for each of those three pillars to ensure that on a consistent basis, you're showing that side of yourself. So in that, within that, we're baking in different trends and following along with, what's trending within social media. We're baking in storytelling. We're baking in series, just different ways for athletes to document and really just create around those different brand pillars.
Yeah, and Jack, I'm also curious to ask you about the a notion of the social responsibility of an athlete. If you've built a successful brand, and you're maximizing on the earning potential of that brand, my friend, I'm curious to ask you about the social responsibility you think athletes have today to sort of pay it forward so that others can prosper as well. So what are your thoughts on social responsibility?
Yeah. So just to clarify, so are you talking about social responsibility within NIL amongst their teammates or within just the overall like landscape of society?
Just the overall landscape of society in terms of if you've really made a brand for yourself and you're making money and maximizing that. I'm just curious if you think there's a social responsibility that athletes have to really give a hand up to other people if they've really maximized their earning potential.
Got it. Yeah. I 100% think that there's a responsibility to give back. And we have implemented that with a lot of athletes. I've seen it done overall just within the space. Athletes, getting compensated for the first time. And, let's remember they're young kids. Like it's their first time touching money. They could in worst cases do some bad things with that money, but with the guidance of schools, with the right people in their corners, we've seen that a lot of times they have decided to give back to hold different philanthropy events, whatever else within the community. And I think that part of the reason they've done that is because they recognize it is a responsibility of theirs. The fact that they have this platform means that they can use it to do good, and a lot of athletes have taken the opportunity to do so. And hopefully it continues to be that way.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, since you brought it up, in terms of safeguarding an athlete against themselves if they're not used to getting that amount of money, I wonder your thoughts on how we can better safeguard athletes so that they can really extend the amount of money they make. Because in some cases, the money they make in college may be the only substantial amount of money they make from an athletic perspective. So I'm curious about the safeguards and how we can help college athletes better manage their money as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I think a lot of institutions are working towards figuring out because, like I said before, we have young kids getting a lot of money in their pockets, and a lot of them aren't necessarily educated enough to know what to do with it. I mean, I'll speak from my own position as a 22-year-old, like as near around the same age as a lot of these athletes. Financial literacy isn't really taught in school. It isn't really taught just naturally, and it takes kind of an initiative, a self-initiative to go figure it out, which I can guarantee a lot of athletes aren't going and doing. So schools are in need to put those different curriculums in place that can help athletes learn how to best handle their money. And some schools are doing it, some different third-party platforms are doing it. And our goal at Out to Win is to really push those platforms because we know the importance of it. And if it's not done, then we could be at risk of, athletes going down the wrong path with managing their money and getting into some trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, I'm curious to ask you your thoughts on how do you manage your quality when it comes to sports partnerships to really make sure that if an athlete is sponsored with a sponsorship, they're really getting the appropriate amount of quality out of the partnership as well.
Mm. So in negotiation with the brand.
Yeah, we'll go that way, sure.
Sure. So It's actually for Out to Win specifically, it's a little bit different from the normal sports marketing agency. We're actually more so acting as the middleman between the deal, more so as a broker as opposed to the agent. So we're not necessarily negotiating on behalf of the athlete. We're not necessarily negotiating on behalf of the brand. We're actually just facilitating the relationship. Most of the athletes we work with have their own agents. Most of the brands that we work with handle their own negotiations. We're actually just setting up the relationship between the brand and the athlete. So from our standpoint, there isn't actually much involvement in that process. However, we still, of course, I still, of course, have my opinions on it. And my thought process is that there is a certain fair market value for what an athlete deserves per post, let's call it, on social media. And we're actually in the process currently of building out an internal algorithm that will create that fair market value for an athlete and a brand to hopefully be able to set some sort of precedence within the landscape that can tell athletes, can tell brands, this is the fair market value. It's still open for negotiation, but if you want to build the most fair possible partnership, this is a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Jack, let's reverse that question then and follow up this way. What do you think is the greatest part about building relationships in sports, and how do we do that effectively?
I mean, that's my favorite part about this industry is that it's all relationship based and it's all like really amazing people, open minded to meeting new people. So the way that we built Out to Win Sports has been through relationships. And I started it as a college student, not really knowing what I was doing transparently. And it was the people in my corner that I met throughout the process that really helped guide me to where we are now. So I guess to directly answer your question, the way to build relationships is by honestly having humility and have to ask questions and really just being open-minded to having conversations with just about anybody. So if someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn and asks to connect, I'm always going to say yes, and I'm always going to set up a call. This podcast is a perfect example. You reached out to me, asked to have me on as a guest. I will always say yes to an opportunity like that. And then on the other side of it, it's conducting that outreach on your own. It's finding people that you have interest in their backgrounds and having the humility to reach out and ask them if they can provide advice through their journey to you. And I think that's the most important part about getting started in the sports industry, because the more relationships that you have in your corner, the easier it is to grow, especially within sports of all industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, there's a sign in my office upstairs that says, life is a constant game of networking, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And I know you're in your early 20s, as you mentioned before, my friend. So I'm curious, what do you attribute your success to as a young entrepreneur, besides, of course, being committed to the hustle, of course? What do you think is contributing to your overall success at such a young age, my friend?
Yeah, no, I love that question. And first off, it's back to relationships. I would definitely attribute part of it to that. But the second thing I would refer to is relentless innovation. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people have entered this space with the idea of just like facilitating a deal between an athlete and a brand. And that's kind of how it all began for me. But my mindset has always been, I want to build something big. I'm here to shake the room up a little bit. And with that in mind, I've always been relentless in innovating within the space. So I'm always trying to see how I can provide not just value, but the most value to the industry. So I'm not afraid to pivot. I'm not afraid to make changes when I feel necessary. And throughout the last two and a half years, we made a lot of changes, and those changes have just continued to inch us closer to the forefront of the space. And I think that's the reason why I've been able to integrate this entrepreneurial spirit into building a company, because of really just the relentless innovation that we've had.
So I'm going to ask you then to define that term, my friend. What does it mean to you to be a relentless innovator, and what does it need to have relentless innovation at the heart of your business, my friend.
I kind of mentioned it in my last little spew. It means being open-minded to pivots. It means having a mission in mind, but knowing that it's going to take different paths, twists, and turns to get there, and being okay with that. It's being able to climb a wall and knowing that you might have to take a step back and find another way around to get to the top. And that's been the main mantra of Out to Win Sports is we have a mission in mind. We don't necessarily know exactly how we'll get there, but we know we'll get there one way or another. It's just about finding the right path along the way to get there. So that has been the way that we've embodied this relentless innovator mindset and really tried to spread it throughout the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, transitioning back to NIL, I'm curious whether you think the advancement of NIL has really given college athletes a sense of empowerment and really knowing their value as well. So, do you think NIL can be transitioned into a positive in terms of providing athletes a sense of empowerment as well?
Yes, and it needs to be. That's the conversation that I like to have because there is all this conversation about the negatives. My favorite conversation to have is about the positives of the space because we're seeing athletes being empowered to build a business, to build a brand. They're empowered to be individuals and take on these ventures that they weren't even allowed to be involved in prior to this legislation being passed. So again, while there are many negatives in the space, I think it's important to shine light on the positives and talk about the empowerment that we've seen of athletes finally being able to individualize themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Jack, that you describe yourself as a sports marketer at heart, and one of your biggest passions, of course, is helping athletes build their brand, as you had mentioned before. But I'm also curious to ask you about how do you guide someone that's not used to being on the sports marketing space and really guide them to ensure that they go in the right direction, especially if they're not used to being on a big stage, my friend. What are your keys there?
So, are you asking about guiding athletes about being on the big stage, or
Yes. So if they haven't been on a big stage in terms of being given a lot of money or their first time sort of building a content brand, what do you think your guidance would be to a first time athlete who really wants to maximize their athletic and earning potential?
Yeah, so my biggest point of guidance right off the bat with an athlete is that you need to allow access to your fans. You need to allow access to your audience. And what that means is documenting a part of your journey, documenting a part of your lifestyle. And it's a hard transition for athletes to make if it hasn't been something they've done in the past. But it's really, really important if you want to reach your full NIL potential to create content and allow that access, like I mentioned. So what that really means is documenting some moments in the locker room, documenting some moments of training, of hanging out with friends, of going out and hanging out on the weekends. It's really important just to build that personal brand because what that does is it allows all these different avenues for brands to come in and associate with you. And then the other side that I kind of inform athletes of before getting into it is that hate is inevitable. And it's really important to expect it to come, but also not let it get to you and build up a little wall to say to yourself, like, hey, the haters are inevitable. They're going to come, but let's use them as a way. Let's embrace them and think of it as almost like a little of a fan, because in reality, what haters are doing, they're boosting engagement. A lot of times they're bringing people into the comment section to start little riffs. One massive thing that I've heard just from athletes I've worked with in the space is that hate gets to you. And that's obviously very understandable. And sometimes it gets athletes to want to stop when it comes to creating content. but that's letting them win. So the biggest thing in my conversations with athletes is find a way to embrace the hate. Be confident and secure enough in yourself to know that you're in the right, and they're in a place of insecurity and wrong when they come into your comment section and post something hateful. And that's honestly a really important aspect of content creation, because unfortunately in this world, it's inevitable to have haters in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody can write something in their parents' basement on a computer, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And on the other side of the spectrum, Jack, I'm also curious to ask you about how you can help protect athletes from the societal pressure of both social media and their increased sort of presence or notoriety. So what I'm asking is, if you have a group of friends, for example, re- that you would consider as your ride or die for the entirety of your life, but you're now realizing that they may not be the greatest for your overall sort of development. So tell me, how do we help athletes sort of manage the societal pressure once they're building their brand as well? Because it's hard to say no to some people if you've known them for your entire life, right? So what are the keys there, my
Yeah.
friend?
I think that's a really, really difficult question, because at the end of the day, you have to come to that decision on your own as an athlete, as an individual, to make the decision who you want to have in your circle. And it's a really important decision to make. It's one that everyone has to make, like, who do you want to spend your time with? Who do you want to be around? Because it's the classic saying that you are who you spend your time with. And at the end of the day, athletes do need to make that decision for their own best interests. And sometimes that does mean cutting people out of your life if you feel like they're there for the wrong reasons and they're making the wrong influence on you. So I guess the answer to that question is I can give as much guidance as I can in making those decisions, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to the athlete making that decision on their own. And I think that's a massive point of growth in an individual's life alone, because we've all gone through times like that where we need to decide, who we want to keep and maybe push out of our main circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And following up on that, Jack, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of mentorships as athletes go through this process and how important that is.
I mean, everyone needs a mentor, because there are people that, realistically in the NIL era, there aren't necessarily people who have been there, done that, but there are athletes who have marketed themselves in certain ways and can give back that knowledge to current college athletes. I think that because of the newness of this era, people like me have emerged as those mentors, just with marketing experience in general. But as the space continues to, get older and evolve, more and more figures now we're seeing of college athletes coming in and providing mentorship to different athletes. Like I'll speak to Josh Black is one of them, Syracuse defensive end who had the back end of NIL within his career, and he's now graduated, but he's been just providing tips and advice to different athletes as to how to best build that personal brand and capitalize on NIL. So the more older NIL gets, the more mentors we're going to see in the space, which will just be made up of past athletes that were able to find ways to capitalize on their NIL in creative fashion.
Yeah, and Jack, just out of personal curiosity, I'm also wondering your perspective on whether you think NIL will sort of push smaller schools out of competing for the more talented athletes and the effect that name, image, and likeness will have on smaller school athletes and schools as well.
Yeah, I mean, with the conference realignment, we're seeing like a little what do you call it? Consolidation of college sports. It's scary, right? Like to see that the bigger conferences are getting bigger, and The bigger money is getting bigger. And I think that while it's scary, it also is increasing just, the urgency around the college landscape, the college sports landscape, to go out and recruit harder. So I think we're going to find out in a few years very soon what's going to happen in response to that question. Like, are the big schools only going to get bigger, and are the small schools only going to get smaller? My hope is that, of course, we can keep some sort of uniform within the landscape where smaller schools are still able to get some of the bigger athletes. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to different benefits that can be offered aside from just large money packages. So schools are going to have to get creative in the different values they can provide to athletes. And I've seen it already in schools bringing in different programs that, empower athletes in different ways, such as entrepreneurship programs, social media, content programs. Some of these smaller schools they're going to have to get creative because they don't have the same type of money to compete with those bigger SEC, Big Ten schools. But we'll see. I'm hoping that that different solutions can be created that don't allow this consolidation to continue growing.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that point, Jack, I'm curious just on a general sense, because I know we're both college sports fans. I'm wondering your thoughts on all of these major schools jumping conferences to sort of take advantage of the money that's being offered if they jump conferences. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on college realignment in terms of conference building as a whole. Just out of curiosity, my friend, what are your thoughts there?
As an athlete advocate, I'm not a huge fan, and that's because we now have student athletes traveling across the country for a Sunday game and maybe coming back for an early Monday morning exam, traveling from the West Coast all the way back to the East Coast. So I just think in terms of like the compensation that athletes aren't getting for like their actual on-field play, to force them to now start traveling across the country on a multiple time a year basis is just a little outrageous. And I all the money from that realignment is going to be going to the schools and the conferences, and not any of it will be going in the pockets of the athletes. And I've definitely heard my fair share of frustration from athletes themselves. So naturally, my opinion goes to the negative side of things. From a college sports fan, it's pretty awesome, right? Like, we're gonna see the best of the best competing against each other on a weekly basis, and that competition will only now rise. So that aspect of it's really cool. But when you look at it from just a bigger picture landscape, not only the football and basketball games, but the field hockey, soccer, lacrosse, hockey, just the entire landscape of college sports, it's like, is it really fair for the athletes? And I lean towards the answer no.
Yeah, because that they lose out on sort of the regional uh, uh, benefits
Yeah.
of really competing, don't they?
And travel is exhausting, like as an athlete, you're traveling so often, and already you're traveling so often, but now you're traveling across the country and back so often. So the fatigue, the different implications of being a college athlete only increase now. And I'm hoping that there will be certain solutions put in place to prevent from some of the different problems that we've seen mental health wise, from like a recent rise in mental health issues within the college sports landscape. I'm hoping that some solutions are put in place, because right now it seems like they're only putting things in place that are going to make that even tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you brought it up, I'll ask you about athletes and mental health, and really how that affects them and the quality of building their brand as well. So, what are your thoughts on the idea of mental health?
It's a really good question, and I've had a lot of conversations about high profile, not about. I've had conversations with high profile student athlete content creators about the implications of burnout and mental health when it comes to building a brand. And I've gotten a wide range of answers. Some athletes say, I mean, I love it, so I don't get burnout. Some athletes say, I have to take weeks off because I'm just so exhausted and mentally drained. My thought process is that uh, at the end of the day, building a personal brand really is a job at times because there are times you don't want to do it, but have to in order to keep up certain consistency. And it's difficult. It takes a mental toll without a doubt. So resources need to be there for athletes when it comes to NIL and of course when it comes to performing within their sport. And we've tried to offer those resources, but we've also tried to empower other programs to be built that can provide those mental health resources to athletes across the country.
Yeah, and Jack, just out of curiosity again, I'm wondering your thoughts on whether you think this bigger uh, college football conferences like the Big Ten or the SEC will eventually sort of go to the NFL model, where they uh, sort of govern themselves between two conferences like the NFC and the AFC, and
Hmm.
whether you think college athletics, especially in football and basketball, is headed in that direction.
It'd be crazy if it is, because that's not never what college you really thought of college football as, right? Like you think of it as, just like a larger landscape, and to put it into that type of model just doesn't seem or feel right, knowing what the history of college football has been. Do I see it coming with just the way that we're seeing all of college sports evolve at the moment? Yeah, I wouldn't be too shocked to hear that as development in place. But um, for the betterment of college sports, I would hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, me too. There's a certain element of college sports that separates it from the professional leagues, isn't it?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and my friend, I'm curious to ask you about whether you think this whole conference realignment will also affect college basketball, specifically the NCAA tournament, and really making sure that we still have those Cinderella moments in college basketball, where we see sort of the little brothers of college basketball sort of ascend to the highest peak of the sport.
That's my favorite part of college sports. So I hope that it stays, and I think it's going to require keeping the similar model that we're operating within now, which is allowing the small teams to play the big teams and have the chance of making runs in March Madness in college football. I do think that there are ways to make college football more fair, because you see some of these tiny schools going up against Alabama and losing by 50. So I think that from a football standpoint, there are ways to make it overall more competitive, but by still allowing for Cinderella teams like you mentioned, that's part of the exciting. That's part of what makes exciting moments within college athletics. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to keep those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jack, I'm going to end our conversation by asking you a two-part question, my friend. And I'm curious to know your personal why in life, my friend, and why you get up with passion in your heart every morning. And when you look at your own personal and professional legacy at such a young age, how do you want that to be defined?
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I love building things, and I mentioned it early on that I'm in love with entrepreneurship and I'm passionate uh about building ventures. And right now, this has been the most fun like 2 year period of my life where I've just had this. I've woken up with excitement every day with the opportunity to build something from scratch, and part of it is also the ability to help others through what I'm building. knowing that I'm making an impact in the lives of athletes, knowing that I'm making an impact in the marketing campaigns of brands. That is really has been my why for building Out to Win Sports. And in terms of the legacy that I want to leave behind professionally, I want to go down as one of the names that revolutionized athlete marketing, because I feel like I've been a part of it since its inception, and have really been a part of its evolvement up to this point. And I want to continue being a part of it as we continue to innovate as a company, to really continue taking athlete marketing from both the side of the athlete and the side of the brand, continue improving it over time and making it into its best possible form.
Yeah.
So that's the professional legacy that I would love to leave behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, just very quickly, you talked about building things and your passion for building things. So, Jack, if I gave you $1 million to produce a commercial about NIL and the evolution of college sports, and I asked you to produce the commercial under the context of an educational tutorial for athletes, what are some of the principles you think you would put in that commercial to make sure that athletes really maximize their name, image, and likeness potential?
Yeah. Let's call it the 3 E's: empowerment, entrepreneurship, and equality. Just going through each of those. So empowerment to build your own brand and become an individual, entrepreneurship to go out and build your own ventures, and equality to have the ball in your court, to be able to go take on those 2 E's prior of entrepreneurship and empowerment to build a personal brand. It's really in your hands to go out and do that. And in my opinion, that makes every single athlete at an equal playing ground.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And finally, tell me, if people want to get connected with the great work that you do at Out to Win Sports, how's the best way they can do that, my friend?
Yeah, I would say reaching out via LinkedIn, Jack Adler, and then our Instagram, definitely follow along with that at Out to Win. Out and then the number 2 Win is where we put up a lot of content about athlete branding, empowerment, NIL, and a lot more to come from that as well.
Fabulous, my friend. As an old sports junkie myself, my friend, I could talk to you for hours, but I'll end our conversation there. And thank you for joining me this morning to talk about name, image, and likeness and college sports in general, because I know it's a passion for both of us. So your work in this space and time on my behalf is most appreciated. And I want to thank you for being here this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you having me, and it was a pleasure fielding some of your questions and having a great conversation. So have a great rest of your day, and I would love to talk again soon.